I've been getting paid to build web apps for 15 years, and once I touched Blazor, I never looked back. But Blazor render modes, well, they can be tricky. So today, let's break them all down and see exactly when to use which. So let's just hit that like button and dive right in. All right, so we start from scratch. You see Visual Studio 2022 it is. We just create a new project and we want to build a Blazor web application. So we choose the Blazor web app template. We also have the standalone thing here. So Blazor, not the server app, this one here, the Blazor WebAssembly standalone app. This is the one that we got with .NET 8 since the new render modes have been introduced. But this is not the one we want to use. We will use it when we add WebAssembly later on, but again, later. So Blazor web app is the template that we want to use. Let's call this Blazor render mode.net 9, for instance. And we hit next. And now here I'm choosing .NET 9 since this is the latest framework, the latest version, no authentication needed. And now it's already interesting. You have to choose what interactive render mode you want to use. So you could choose none, server, WebAssembly, or auto, which is a combination of server and WebAssembly. Again, I will explain every single one of them. And I suggest we build up on none, because when you choose none, it is the static server-side rendering mode, let's call it that way, meaning that we have no WebSockets, we have no WebAssembly, we have plain old traditional static server-side rendering. So the server is rendering everything and then sending the finished, ready, done HTML, you name it, to the client. So let's do that. We can include sample pages, of course, and that's it. So let's just create this thing. And when we're done, the project isn't that big, right? We can close this one, and the program CS here is already very important because this one tells us here that these are the only things that have been added. Razor components, register services required for server-side rendering. Again, in this case, the static server-side rendering of Razor components. And down here you see map Razor components means maps the page components defined in the specified app to the given assembly and renders the components specified by app when the route matches. Okay, maybe this is not something that is that clear, but we will, when we later use the WebSocket thing, server render mode, and then also WebAssembly, we will add something here to this line and to this line. So keep this in mind, please. Apart from that, there's not much to it. If you're already a bit experienced with Blazor, you got your Razor components here, you got your imports file, app Razor, and in this app Razor file, you see components like the head, outlet, and the routes. Now here, there's another trick to it. Let's say if you want to use a render mode globally, as it was the case before .NET 8, for instance, you were building a Blazor server app or a Blazor WebAssembly app, then for the global application, render mode there was the specific, well, render mode, WebAssembly or server. You can still do that here. It's for every component, you can say, set the render mode to interactive auto, server, or WebAssembly, for instance. Now, this would then mean that every component will use the interactive server render mode. But this is not what we want to do. I really love the flexibility of the new render modes where I can decide for every single component what render mode I want to use. So for instance, when we go here to the pages and the weather, here you see we are only using static server-side rendering, so no render mode attribute used here, right? So we could add one and then say again interactive server, for instance. But this would not work here so far because we haven't made the changes in the program CS. So far it's just static server-side rendering here now combined with stream rendering. And still, although it's not particular a render mode, I think it's important to tell you what this thing actually means. So let's run this real quick. There we are. We open the console as well, because now here you see no comment, no log about using a WebSocket connection or WebAssembly, right? This will change in a minute. And when we now go to the weather page, you see that there was a little loading text there, right? Let's do that again, home and then loading, and then we get the data. When I now remove this attribute here, stream rendering, and restart the application, there we are. When I now go to weather, we don't see a loading text. And this is what stream rendering is all about, right? Static server-side rendering combined with stream rendering means that when you implemented something where you need data, then when we go back here, they are simulating a web service call, for instance, with these 500 milliseconds a day. But when you need this data, then with stream rendering, you can start already loading the page, but the data then comes later and will be streamed into the result of that page, right? And if you don't use stream rendering, then the user has to wait until the complete data has been loaded. So I think this is the most important thing to think about when using static server-side rendering, that you have the option to be actually really fast and still use dynamic data from a database. It's interesting for a blog, for instance, right? So you can do that there as well. And also important here regarding SEO, search engine optimization. Let's have a look at this real quick. So here now, when we go to the network tab and this thing here, and now let's see if this works. We just reload the page and go to all. All right, and now here I see the weather. When I go to preview, I already see the data here, right? So this is actually the same thing that all the robots of the search engines should see as well. But when I go back to Visual Studio now, and now I add this attribute back, restart the app, we are reloading again. And let's see if this worked as well. Nope, let me not preserve the log, remove that. And maybe we go back to the home page first and then go to the weather page again. Now we have a look here. I don't see the preview, so let's reload again. Now we have a preview, and this is what I wanted to show you. You see the loading text, right? But you don't see the actual data. Now maybe there are search engines, crawlers, whatever it is, that can work with that, but this is something to think about if you want to use this functionality, let's say. All right, use this feature. Okay, but in essence, that's it to static server-side rendering. One example I also want to show you is this thing here, the website of the .NET Web Academy, completely done with static server-side rendering. So everything you see here that has any kind of effects, any videos you can see, any previews, whatever it is done with static server-side rendering. And speaking of the .NET Web Academy, as you can see, the spring sale is currently running. You can get up to 70% off on any course or platform. So if you're interested, just check out the link in the video description below. Thank you very much. Now let's continue with the next render mode, and this would be Blazor Server, WebSocket stuff. To use it, we have to go to the program CS first. So we open up the Solution Explorer, and here now, as promised, we have to add something, and this would be add interactive server components. Exactly that. And as you can see, the tooltip says add services to support rendering interactive server components in a Razor component application. And down here now, we add this thing, add interactive server render mode, like that. And the tooltip here says now configures the application to support the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components Web Render Mode Interactive Server Render Modes. All right. So now this is everything we need. So if you also start with a template and say, I want to already use the server render mode, this is everything that would be done for you. And now what we can do is we can again go to the weather page here. We remove stream rendering because it really only makes sense when you are going to use static server-side rendering. But if you want to use server-side rendering, only server without static, so using WebSockets, we have to do the following. We write render mode and then interactive server, like that. So let's try that real quick. All right, there we are. Let me go back to the console and reload this thing. So here now we are reloading. We see still the loading text, right? This works now out of the box. We see the data, but we see something else here. We see information WebSocket connected to. So we have new WebSocket information there. We opened a WebSocket, but the amazing thing now is when we go back to the home page, then after a couple of seconds, this WebSocket connection has been closed. Isn't that nice? So this really works for each component where you want to use WebSockets. Let's say you need an online connection all the time. I don't know, for a chat maybe, for an AI chatbot. Check out the info card. There you can see how to do that. And then you can say that only for this component, I want to use this render mode. But it doesn't stop there. Here you see this is a complete page. But we can again use only the render mode for specific components. So let's say we add another folder here called, well, if Visual Studio wants to, called shared. And in the shared folder, we add another Blazor component. And for this example, we make it really, really simple. Just a button, call this my button. And now regarding the code, we add button, add on click me. This is a good suggestion here. And of course, we also need a function for that. So let's just say we have our void on click function like that. And it is suggesting that, but I want to display the text right here. So let's say span add text. All right. And now here we say text is text. I know I have to add this. Wait a sec. Button clicked, and we add our text here as well. Let's say string text is string empty, like that. All right, so that's it. We have the button here where we can say just click me, and when we click on this text on this button, then we see this text. So let's try that this time on the home page. So we go to the home page here, and down there we just add my button. And what I want to do as well is, well, we have a couple of options here. Either we write the namespace there as well, or with control and period, we can say we add the using up there, or we just put this into our imports Blazor file like that. All right. So now the button is available, but let's try that first. So we restart our app. There we are already, little typo here, nice. When I click this thing, nothing is happening, right? Because in the homepage here, we have no interactive render mode, no server, no WebAssembly, only static server-side rendering. So this does not really work. We could make this work if we would use a classic HTML form, but this is for another video. So we can go to the homepage, remove the typo here, and either add the render mode here, for instance. So render mode, interactive server, and let's try that again. There we are. We can click on this thing and now it works. But this is not the only option you have. We can instead go to our component and say here, this component always has to use the interactive server render mode. So let's try that. We click on that thing, everything works. And the last option now is, maybe you paid attention in the app Blazor file, we did it already. Here now we can just say add render mode is interactive server, like that. All right, so the home page has no render mode defined on top here, but with the button we can say no, please use the interactive server mode. So there we are, and we can click this button, it works, and again you see that the WebSocket connection is open. We can even see the details if you want to. So let's go to the network tab, and then we filter for WebSockets. Let's reload this thing. This is the WebSocket connection we're looking for, and we see the messages here as well. And when I click on this thing, you see that something is happening here. So we can even have a look. Maybe we find something interesting. I don't know, JS render mode, begin invoked, and so on. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you see the coordinates there where the mouse clicked. But anyways, this is how the interactive server render mode works. And now let's continue with Blazor WebAssembly, because Blazor WebAssembly is a bit more complicated. If you want to add it afterwards, you have to add an additional client project. So here now we add a new project, and this time it is a Blazor WebAssembly standalone thingy here. Where is it? There it is. Blazor WebAssembly standalone. Let's open it up here as well again. So Blazor WebAssembly standalone app, a project template for creating a Blazor app that runs on WebAssembly. This template can be used for web apps with rich dynamic user interfaces. This is exactly what we want. So we hit next. We call this now Blazor render modes.net 9, and then client. And if you're interested in the code, well, it's in essence the template, but still I made some changes there. Check out the link in the video description below for the source code download. So we hit next. .9 again, no authentication, HTTPS, include sample pages. Why not? We hit create, and there's now our client project. And now we can remove lots of stuff actually, and I have to look this up, of course. But if you use the WebAssembly render mode at the beginning by using the Blazor web app template, this is done for you. All right, so you won't see all that you see here. It is already the minimal version that you need. So here now we don't actually need the app razor. So let's remove this thing. Let me open the Solution Explorer and pin it. And now regarding the pages, actually don't need them as well. We also don't need any layouts here. Of course, disclaimer, if you want to use pages with WebAssembly, then of course you can add your pages folder and use it then as you would have, well, as you've seen it a couple of seconds ago before I deleted it. Now regarding the www root folder, pretty much the same thing. We actually don't need anything here out of the box. So let's just remove it. Access to the lib folder is denied. All right, then let's just keep it for now. But here we can remove everything. But then the next part are the packages actually and the dependencies. So here you see we've got net core app, we've got WebAssembly and WebAssembly dev server. And we have a look at the server project. We have ASP.NET Core app, net core app, but the project is not referenced, and we also have to add another thing. So first let's add the project. So here now we add a new dependency. Wait a sec, let me do it here. Yep, add project reference. This is what I wanted. So the client. All right. And regarding, now we get the project, but now regarding the packages, we also need the WebAssembly server package. So let's mention you get packages here. And then this would be under browse WebAssembly server. And now we need some space. That's the one, not the dev server, this one. Runtime server features for ASP.NET Core Blazor application. So Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components WebAssembly server. This is the one that we need. So let's install this. All right. And when this is all done, then the last change is in the program CS, because what we need there is not this line, not this line. We don't need the HTTP client in our example, but if you want to make web service calls, then of course you need the HTTP client. All right, so just keep that in mind. Let me just uncomment this. For our example, again, not necessary, but for, let's say, the typical SPA, single page application framework, would work like that the Blazor server project is your web API, let's say, with controllers or a minimal API, you name it. And your WebAssembly client project then is the front end, right? Blazor WebAssembly only then in this case. So you can totally still do that with .NET 9 or 8. And I guess with 10 as well. All right, so this is now our program CS. Let me double check. Yep, this looks good. And now we want to use Blazor WebAssembly, right? So to do that, let me simply move our button to the client project and remove it there. So this shared folder is gone. We are here, we have our button here. All right, and now regarding the home page here, let's say, we now can say interactive web assembly, like that. All right, I guess. And then the last change, maybe you know it, we have to add another line here. So now we say add interactive web assembly components. It's a capital A. All right, and now down here we also add WebAssembly, but that's not all. We need something else as well, and that would be add additional assemblies. And here we have to add a reference. Typically we always have the imports there, and we want this imports file. So now assembly for that, and this should be it. But as you can see here, we get this error, ambiguous reference. Yep, we have an imports in our server project, right, and in our client project. So let's use this one here and put it down there. All right, now this should work. So here we got our configuration now done for the program CS. Now here in the home, we use the capital A, please. All right, but the actual error is, of course, the button is not known anymore. So we can add this thing here again, or move that to the imports again of our server, because this thing is not available anymore. So let's do the client one. And now the error is also gone. So let's restart the application. We get an error, layer doesn't exist. Yep, that's true. So let's remove that. I removed the folder. All right, now it worked, but I have to show you. When you weren't watching, I had to do something else, and that would be here now in the www root folder. You don't see it now anymore, but there was this lib folder, and that led to trouble. So I had to close Visual Studio, open it in the Windows Explorer, and then, or in the File Explorer, remove it, and now it works. So here now let's see what's actually happening. So back to the console, and you can already see this is different now, right? This thing here loaded 16 megabytes resources only in the debug mode. This button now works with WebAssembly. This is the big difference. We have no WebSocket connection here anymore. We can double check here in our network tab, WebSockets, we reload this thing. You see this is for debugging in Visual Studio, but we don't have this Blazor question mark thingy from before, right? So no WebSocket connection anymore. This button now runs on WebAssembly. And again, as you can see here as well, we have this comment, which means that it downloaded the WebAssembly resources. We now go to the weather page. Then we see that Blazor Server works as before. And when we go back to home, then nothing will be downloaded anymore. We have the data, but the WebSocket connection is closed. All right. One thing I want to show you here is still the auto render mode, because I think you get the idea by now that with the actual component, the button, you can set the render mode here or there on top, or in the actual component, right? You can do it at any place. It's exactly the same with Blazor WebAssembly as it was with Blazor Server. But what about interactive auto now? Let's just change it. It is now there for us. We don't have to configure anything in the program CS. Let's just restart the application. There we are. Let me just reload this thing again. And now I have to, because it is already cached, so it is getting everything from, well, it's using WebAssembly here. But when we go to application and actually here in storage, clear the site data, go back to console, and now empty cache and hard reload. This is what I wanted to show you. Now you see that we have this WebSocket connection open. But simultaneously in the background, it is downloading the WebAssembly files. Now, when I go to the weather, for instance, we still have a WebSocket connection, but that would be interesting. When I now go back to home, then WebSocket connection is still open, right? But when I reload the page now, let's do that, we won't see a WebSocket connection. See that? It's only WebAssembly. So now the button runs with WebAssembly. Everything works as expected. And these are all the render modes in a nutshell. But there is one very important pitfall of all render modes. And if you want to see this pitfall, check out this video here on the screen.